Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a book review on 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes is the story of the women during the 10-year Trojan War. From the Trojan women captured by the Greeks to the goddesses fueled by jealousy, 1,000 Ships puts the women at the center who have been relegated to the background of the warrior men's stories. So, I think I went into this book expecting a straight out linear retelling of the Iliad by Homer. And that was kind of my first big mistake, kind of thinking that initially going into this book. This book is not really like retelling, you know, the story of the Iliad in like a traditional sense. Like I said, it's not going in a linear manner from like, you know, day one of the war to the end of the war. The way the layout of this novel is, what Natalie Haynes does with this book, instead of kind of just, you know, telling a straight out retelling, you know, going just, you know, from start to finish, she's taking, you know, all of these various different women that you may know about, you know, through either reading the Iliad or the Odyssey, both by Homer. And each woman kind of has like what I would say is like a short story, if you will. The layout of the book is done like vignettes, if you will, or short stories, however you want to think about it. Some women do have a couple chapters, but then yes, some women, they may only have one chapter in this entire book. So all of these little short stories, if you will, however you kind of want to think about it, they all take place at various different times over the course of this 10-year war. If you know anything about the Iliad by Homer, yeah, it's about the Trojan War that took place for 10 years, blah 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 blah, you know, all that stuff, Paris going and capturing Helen of Sparta, as she was known, and then she becomes Helen of Troy, and yeah, you know, the woman who launched 1,000 ships, as the title of this book says. And yeah, her husband, pissed off, he starts, you know, this whole war essentially to reclaim her. So yeah, that's what this book is about. Really strongly focusing strictly on the women, putting them at the heart and center of this book, and yeah, what they're getting up to during the events of this 10-year war. Like I said, some women have multiple chapters, but there's quite a few of them that they only have their one chapter, and that's kind of it. And a lot of the book, really, a lot of it, there's some stuff that takes place at the beginning, some that takes place in the middle, but a lot of it kind of takes place, a lot of the individual women's stories, a lot of it takes place really kind of as the war is concluding, and I guess, spoiler alert, the Greeks win, the Trojans, you know, Trojans lose, you know, the Trojan horse and whatnot. if you know the story, the Trojan horse comes on through and it's done from there on, you guys. So a lot of this is really kind of the aftermath of, you know, the Trojan horse coming on in, and the Greeks winning, and kind of this, you know, that aftermath, what a lot of these women, you know, what they're anticipating, where are their lives and their journeys going and whatnot. And yeah, this book, you guys, this is a pretty heavy, kind of dark and depressing book in some ways. Like I said, if you know anything about the Iliad by Homer, you know, many of the, and Natalie Haynes, I mean, she, whatever kind of happens to the women, she keeps that in the narrative. You know, she doesn't just sit and conveniently change anything, you know, so everybody can have happily ever afters and whatnot, you know. A lot of the women, they are sold into slavery, you know, to the invading army, which was the Greeks, and they're just taken back, you know, just scattered all across Greece and whatnot, or the various Greek islands or whatever. You know, women are, yeah, like I said, they're sold into slavery, they are raped, they are sacrificed, they are murdered. Yeah, there's a lot of dark and depressing stuff in this book, but what I love that Natalie Haynes does with this book, by putting all these women at the core, the center of this book, and giving these women voices and whatnot. Some of these characters, there's a lot of characters in here, there's a lot of women I have never even really heard of, or if I did hear of them, it's like they were maybe only mentioned like once or twice in the entirety of the Iliad, or women mentioned from other canon, like during this time period, when Homer wrote this book and whatnot. Because yeah, there is the Iliad and the Odyssey, obviously, but there is a lot of other canon that can be part of the Trojan War. So I can't remember half of the titles because a lot of them are like in Greek or Latin or whatever, but there's a lot of other stuff, and Natalie Haynes is pulling a lot of other female characters from some of the other canon to really flesh out this story and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like I'm kind of just moving ahead too much here. But yeah, going back to what I was initially saying, what Natalie Haynes kind of does, since this is rather dark and depressing in places, like I said, women getting raped, women getting sacrificed to the gods or whatever, women getting sold into slavery. The thing is, this is Natalie Haynes' attempt, by giving all of these various different women voices and personalities and whatnot, and for these women to tell their stories, and that even though these terrible things are happening to them, they are facing a lot of incredible violence and brutality. The thing is, they are getting to share their stories and their opinions, and it's kind of Natalie Haynes' way of letting these women like reclaim themselves, reclaim their identities, reclaim their stories, and tell their stories in the way that they should be told, rather than by the victors telling the story, And I think a lot of times when you are reading something like the Iliad or the Odyssey or other bits of the canon with the Trojan War, sometimes the women can sit and come across like damsels in distress. So yeah, Natalie Haynes is definitely trying to do the opposite of that, and that these women, they are in fact not damsels in distress, and she's giving them agency essentially over the fate that is coming to them, because a lot of these women know what is in store for them. They are anticipating some terrible things to happen to themselves, because yeah, they are the losing side and whatnot. So they are kind of preparing themselves and being like, hey, you're going to do this to me, you're going to do that, but I'm not going to let you win. I'm not going to let you see that you have beaten me and that you have won. So yeah, I think Natalie Haynes does a great job of, despite a lot of the brutality and violence that's going on with these women, it's like they still have some control over what is happening to them, in a sense, by telling their own story, if that makes sense. So, as I've already mentioned, the layout of this book is done almost like a short story type of style, if you will. And that narrative may or may not work out for you personally. Kind of just depends on what you're kind of expecting as you're heading into this book. Because initially, I was having a bit of trouble with this book. Because, like I mentioned, I went into it thinking this was going to be like a linear retelling of the Iliad, and it definitely is not. So initially I was a little bit disappointed. I was like, oh, this isn't really kind of what I was looking forward to. But once I kind of relaxed and got into it, and the deeper and deeper I got into the book, the more and more I did start enjoying it and liking it, and kind of getting the idea and the points of what Natalie Haynes is doing with this book, by focusing on these women and kind of the messages and themes that she's going for. And so yeah, the layout of this book, depending on you as a reader, the short story format may not really work for you. It just kind of depends. And what also may not work for some people, if you are a fan of this era and this type of, the Greek literature and whatnot, if you are a fan of some of these women, many of the women, like I mentioned, some of them only have a chapter, some of them have a couple. Your favorite heroine may be missing in action, and you may not get as much of her as you want, Helen of Troy, for instance. You guys, if you're a fan of Helen of Troy and you're expecting Helen of Troy to be in this book a lot, get that out of your head. There is no Helen of Troy, you guys. She does make, like, what I would call her cameo appearances, especially in the chapters dealing with Hecuba, because Hecuba is the wife of King Priam of Troy. So Helen is there, part of like that set of the Trojan women and whatnot. But yeah, Helen's kind of just a cameo appearance. She says a few lines and that's about it. But yeah, there's absolutely no chapters given to Helen of Troy specifically, which I found to be an interesting choice from Natalie Haynes. I'm kind of curious why she did that. I don't know if she kind of felt like there's a lot of other Helen of Troy historical fiction out there. Why do I need to add to it? You know, I want to focus on all the other women that everybody just forgets about because everyone's so focused and fascinated on Helen of Troy. So I wonder if that's what Natalie Haynes was doing. Because there's been a lot of, not only just historical fiction, but like, you know, movies and television series that have focused like on Helen of Troy over the last several decades, you know? So yeah, there's not really much more to add to Helen of Troy's story in some ways. So yeah, if you're looking for Helen of Troy, she's not in this book, you guys. She's like literally a cameo appearance, and that's about it. As far as other characters that get some attention, I already mentioned Hecuba, who was the wife of King Priam of Troy. She gets quite a number of chapters, which was nice. Cassandra, the seer, she gets a chapter or two. Briseis gets some chapters. Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, I was really looking forward to her chapters, and I was a little disappointed with what Natalie Haynes did with Penelope. I was a little frustrated with Penelope because Penelope, all of her chapters were like letters to Odysseus. Because if you've read the Odyssey, you know that not only is Odysseus gone for 10 years during the Trojan War, but then he gets lost for like another 10 freaking years over the course of the events of the Odyssey as he's trying to make his way home. But he keeps getting held up by gods and monsters, essentially, just unforeseen circumstances getting in his way. So Penelope's chapters are kind of a bit frustrating because she's kind of just the whole time just going on and on about Odysseus this, Odysseus that, you know, and she's essentially kind of just retelling the Odyssey, like what she's heard from storytellers tell about his story. She's just telling us about the Odyssey, essentially. And I feel like we're not getting very much with, like, Penelope herself. It's more focused on Odysseus than it is on Penelope, I feel like. So I was kind of a little frustrated with that. I needed more Penelope, you know, just Penelope, if you get my drift. Because I do love Penelope. I mean, I love Odysseus and Penelope together. I love that whole relationship they have. But yeah, it's like, I needed, you know, a bit more space there, you know, rather than her, it's like her whole thing is just Odysseus this, is Odysseus that, you know. And as far as some other random women, there's like a woman, literally, like, I think it's like chapter 1, a woman who's telling her story the night that the Greeks burned down Troy, essentially, once the Trojan horse has gone through, it sounds like. That very first night and whatnot, there's a woman, we're seeing her point of view as the city of Troy is burning, where that story ends. One of my favorite chapters in this book is actually the chapter dealing with how the Trojan War even kind of gets started. What initially makes Paris kidnap Helen to begin with, and it's this rivalry and feud going on between the Greek goddesses. Which ones was it? It was Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, correct? If I'm remembering that correctly. Those three particular goddesses, that rivalry and feud, and they find like this apple, and yeah, they find Paris, and basically being like, hey Paris, which one of us is hotter? Pick one of us. And then yeah, them kind of manipulating him into be like, hey, there's a hot woman in Sparta who, you know, could be your future wife, and this and that. And, so yeah, it's the Greek goddesses. It's their fault that Paris, you know, does what he does, you know, by kidnapping Helen and whatnot. So that's actually one of the highlight chapters in this book, focusing on those particular goddesses, and it's pretty hilarious and silly and absurd. A great chapter though. And then yeah, there's another chapter with a Amazon warrior woman, which was a badass chapter, but at the same time it was kind of short and done and over with very quickly in the context of this book. And that was kind of a frustrating chapter, because it's like you have an Amazon female warrior. It's like I wanted more with that. I feel like that could have been fleshed out more, especially since, yeah, I mean, that's really the only warrior, female warrior in this entire story, because everybody else is, wives or daughters and whatnot. So that was kind of refreshing having, like a woman like that. So yeah. Your favorite female heroine may or may not have much of an appearance in this book, so just depending on who your favorite character is, you're either going to be happy or disappointed with their lack of involvement in this story. And I almost forgot about Agamemnon's wife. Yeah, guys, I want to give a shout out to her really quickly before I kind of move on to my concluding thoughts here. Her particular chapter, once the war's over, Agamemnon has come back. He's won the Trojan War. If you've read all that stuff with what happens there, it is epic, you guys. I love her chapter in particular. Her getting her revenge on her husband who's been away for 10 years and what he did to even, get to Troy to begin with, if you know the story. So yeah, how is her name pronounced? Clytemnestra? I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I don't think I am. But yeah, her chapter definitely is a highlight, you guys. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. Despite my initial disappointment with this book, I ended up really liking it. And yeah, the whole point of this book really is just to let these women, reclaim their identities and reclaim their stories and give them agency in the fates that's kind of coming to them and whatnot. So yeah, just depending on you as a reader, you're either going to like this or not, just depending on what you're expecting. But yeah, that's kind of the big thing you need to know about this book. It's definitely more short stories, so focusing on, a specific woman at a time, and some of them have multiple chapters or some of them just have one chapter. So yeah, it'd be up to you if you like it or hate it, I guess. But yeah, once I got going with it, I was pretty pleasantly surprised with it, and I did end up enjoying it for the most part, for sure. So yeah, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.